Welcome to another edition of Geopolitics and Empire. As always, quick reminder, support this podcast. I need your support. Best way you can do that is by becoming a paid subscriber on the Substack. If you choose the annual option, you'll get a discount. We do weekly Zoom chats, maybe every week or two, with myself and supporters only off the record. We shoot the breeze, sort of a conspiracy therapy. I also bring back past podcast guests to do a live Q&A with the supporters only. And I do a weekly analysis in video format of the most important news of the week. So you can get access to that by becoming a paid subscriber. You can donate through the websites, purchase a consult with me if you want to chat about expatriating, geopolitics, the meaning of life. Do check out all of my wonderful affiliates. Leave a podcast review if you haven't already. And joining us for the first time on Geopolitics and Empire is 7Cs, who's brand new to the alternative media scene, and he's already making waves, and he's got a show on Ickonic called This Week on the Web. Welcome to Geopolitics and Empire, number 7.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It is an honor to be here. I'm a huge fan of the Independent Media Alliance and all the work that you guys do.
Yeah, that sprouted up, I think, mid last year, and a whole bunch of folks, Ryan Christian, Derek Brose, Charlie Robinson, Whitney Webb, Catherine Austin Fitz, Steve Poicona, and myself. I don't even know who else. There's just Richard Grove, James Corbett, and then we bring in other guests for the panels, Kit Knightley, Off Guardian, and others. So Ian Davis, I don't want to forget people, but there's so many folks. But yeah, you're doing really good work. As soon as I found your X account, I don't remember, some months back, you're doing great analysis. I'm like, this guy is on point. And whatever you want to tell us about yourself and sort of your foray into conspiracy sleuthing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I sort of grew up always having like a problem with authority, which I think has been a sort of a common trait with people in this journalistic space. Always questioning why. My parents used to always say something like, because I said so. And that just always, never sat well with me, and carried on into like teachers and then eventually like different jobs and things like that. I grew up sort of keeping that sort of principle or mentality, I guess. And as I got older, it sort of stemmed into, questioning the government specifically. I would say sometime in high school, I had a little bit of an awakening, learned about like the Rothschilds, institutional banking industry. 9/11 was obviously, I think, a big inflection point for people to mistrust the government and the things that they do. From there, I, graduated, fell into my 20s, made a lot of mistakes, and just sort of, went from job to job. So I did a little bit of like roofing and construction. I've worked at a couple of different call centers, customer service jobs. I started out in a grocery store.
Me too. Yeah. I did 5 years, high school and university in the grocery store.
Nice. I started as a bag boy at Kroger when I was 17. And, from there, I actually, through that job, met one of my closest friends that really kind of like blew the door open for me on further conspiracy things. Me and him actually host a podcast together, and have managed to like maintain a relationship and a friendship through all these years. And, we watched all kinds of like conspiracy things together, just like late at night, old YouTube videos and stuff. Alex Jones was, back in the day, at least, pretty good about like putting things on people's radar and really kind of speaking to this globalization that we've seen, especially in the last 20 to 30 years, with geopolitics. And through my later years, in my later 20s, kind of stopped becoming so politically focused because I just, focused on like paying bills, and living got expensive, and trying to be out on my own and not have to like fall back to going to my parents' house for any reason if I could. I actually spent a small stint of 1 year being voluntarily homeless, I guess, like bouncing around from couch to couch and things like that, because I just I had struggled to sort of get it together. Wasn't making the best life choices, but I said I'll be damned if I'm gonna, go back and live under, my parents and their rules and stuff. So, as I started to hit my later 20s, 2016 happened. I tried to sort of get like politically involved. I bought into the whole propaganda. I fell for it. I was duped. I was young and dumb. And I really, really resonated with me the sentiments behind some of the politicians. But as I've come to learn in retrospect, a lot of those things seem to have been a Trojan horse for a lot more nefarious things. 2020 happened, and I think that was a sort of big wake up call for a lot of people. That's when my mistrust of the government, the powers that be, sort of expanded and exponentially grew. I saw the things that they were trying to force on people, and the fact that there was what seemed like a worldwide coordination to perpetuate this sort of theory and propose solutions and things on people. We here in America, we didn't have it quite as bad as places like Europe, where they were a little more authoritarian about the things that they were trying to push on people, and slowly over time became disenfranchised with the work that I was doing. So I worked for a social media company for a while, and in 2022 they did some things that I wasn't necessarily okay with, and that transition sort of pushed me to, I called it out a lot and called out my concerns and things like that. And nobody wanted to listen or anything that they sort of championed as far as, user data safety and trying to provide like a comfortable space for creators and users to just connect and interact. And, obviously all of that was nonsense because their actual agenda is spying on people, controlling the narrative. And I've come to really, really realize that in the last couple of years. But I decided that I wanted to stop listening to other people, stop having people that tell me what to do. So I decided to go out and work for myself. I was very inspired by like a lot of self-made content creators who some of them now are not self-made, as I've come to learn in my research. And I decided to start a YouTube channel. I was doing music kind of full time as well, trying to just sort of get some things out there and try to get what little income that I could to try to support my living. And I was doing a sort of a YouTube series that was called Just Talking, where I would just pull up news stories and things like that, provide very surface level commentary, criticisms on politicians or ridiculous headlines. And I decided to watch the news behind the Trump assassination and then eventually the nomination of J.D. Vance as vice president. And I wasn't aware of who J.D. Vance was. And as I started to dig into him, I learned about Peter Thiel specifically, and that sort of opened things up because I saw his investments in things like Founders Fund and how he was tied to like the NSA mass surveillance program, Carbine 9/11 with the Hood Barak, Jeffrey Epstein. And I started to plot these things out in a web on this program called Obsidian. And it slowly just started to grow and grow into this huge sphere of things. And I realized all of these things that Thiel had his fingers in, and have sort of taken that realization and tried to apply it with my future work, and seeing that some connections that may seem, loose or something like that, over time, if you can slowly build a pattern or like an association matrix of different people in different positions and things like board seats and stuff like that, that there tends to be some commonalities in like their goals, their accomplishments, things that they seek to achieve, and especially like within government, we see things like APAC funding all of these politicians that obviously repeat talking points and push policies on behalf of Israel. You have, people like JD Vance, who met Peter Thiel when Peter Thiel was giving like a speech at Yale one day, and JD Vance also like going to Yale with Vivek Ramaswamy and them being friends there. Now, I don't think there's any coincidence that all three of them are sort of tied together on the political stage and operating on behalf of the Donald Trump administration, for example. And I just started posting and doing these like really long posts, trying to explain all of these things to people. I slowly started to learn about technocracy, transhumanism, and looking back into their ties with help from other people who have done the research before me. Obviously, David Icke was a big inspiration. I'm still trying to, I don't read as often as I should, but I'm still trying to make it through his book, The Reveal, all the way through. And people like Hackable Animal, his name's Dustin Gold. He did a bunch of work a few years ago on technocracy and sort of laying out how it's influenced the last 100 years. Refound Fathers helped me come to understand like the Rockefeller inspiration behind like the medical industry and all of their influences and things like that. So I'm trying my best to play catch up while still remaining, on top of breaking news and things like that.
Yeah, so let's get into then the big picture. I mean, and what you mentioned, you said you were fooled in 2016. I think everyone, all of us were fooled at some point, and we all have our own sort of waking up out of this stupor. I'll look at my younger self and just cringe sometimes with the things that I've believed, and as well as I like you use the term disenfranchised. When it came to the workplace, and I was a teacher for over a decade, university professor and teacher, and after COVID, I also became very disenfranchised with working anywhere. After seeing the things, we're forced to teach the official narratives. I've had courses taken away as forms of punishments, and what they did during the 2020s. People, you take this medical application or you're fired. And there's people that I know across the world who were teachers who were fired because of that. And so it's very, it's. You want to try to sort of do it's difficult, but it's if we can carve our own path, right? Mm-hmm. Podcasts or as entrepreneurs or small business owners or whatever, or working for companies that have good ethics. And also, you mentioned the maps. A few researchers do that. Richard Grove, of course, Matthew Crawford, who's been on the podcast, he makes these charts. Yourself as well. Maybe I'll have to start getting into that. Also, and my big picture, sort of what I like to start with my guests is I sort of reiterate my position. For me, the most important thing that's going on, these sort of top 2 or 3 things that I focus on the most is globalism, world government, and the algocracy or technocracy, right? Because I feel like everything else is background noise, because now we're seeing these, you have the European Union. Now we're seeing them work towards a North American Union and a Central American Union, and that's all world government stuff. That's all about this bringing about this totalitarian world state. So that's the big number one project. And then the second is to bring in, on top of that, once they have the world government structure, bring in the digital sort of control grid that locks everyone into place. And, I've had on the podcast, Ian Davis, Patrick Wood, the Technocracy, he's our go-to for technocracy. And I use the term algorithm ghetto, right? Because I had on in 2020, Edwin Black, the guy who wrote IBM and the Holocaust and all that stuff. And he says they're building this algorithm ghetto where, they're going to lock us in. And if you don't do what they say, they just shut you off and you slowly die. You'll starve to death in your home. They don't have to send, Stasi to your house anymore. because you can't buy food and no one's going to help you because then they'll be in the algorithm ghetto. And, way back in 2020, I was on Spiros Kouras's, Corbett just dropped a great episode on algocracy. And it was way back in March of 2020. I told Spiros Kouras on his channel, look, COVID was all about bringing in global algocracy, rule by algorithm, rule by artificial intelligence. And so that's sort of my take. What's sort of your take as to big picture? What is going on? Who are the elites? What are they trying to do, and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of the sort of international relations and ties and things like that have been going on a lot longer than history sort of tells us. Like, you look at like the French Revolution, for example, where you had people that were convincing the king to make all of these certain decisions that ended up turning the populace against him, and then creating sort of this revolution that took place. And then after the revolution, choosing to fund the US revolution to kind of counter their defeat from the UK. The year before the revolution took place, the Illuminati was founded. I don't think that that's any sort of coincidence, all the Freemasonry ties to the founding fathers and stuff. Now, as far as it goes, I think that every major government and organization in the world has sort of slowly been tiptoeing us and corralling us towards this global system. They've largely operated on the international banking system by people like the Rothschilds, and then eventually, financial institutions like BlackRock, Sequoia Capital, Vanguard. And now I think we're starting to see that is being handed over to big tech. So big tech, having this global reach and all of these tools and technologies with which to be assets to different governments. So whether that's spying on people, being able to, further militarize the police and like their surveillance systems and profiling systems. The internet itself, being created by what would become DARPA in collaboration with things like schools like Stanford. I just see the internet as sort of like one big spying tool that, they present as this is good for you. It's going to increase convenience, communication. I feel like that's sort of their modus operandi, is push things through like private sector if they can, to remove that association from government and find ways to further get people all into this collective system. And as we've sort of seen with, Elon's Doge and just the general sentiment everywhere, it seems like that they are attempting to use the old systems to sort of be a scapegoat towards trying to earn trust with the public. We sort of saw that with like I'm going to put this in quotes, but the death of Jeffrey Epstein and his like blackmail empire and stuff sort of crumbling, when really all that happened was it's now all handled digitally, right? By people like Peter Thiel, Palantir, in collaboration with Mossad and things like that. And I think that there's a huge influence from like the esoteric perspective as well, like the occult perspective.
Before going there, I always reference Mark Passio, the former Satanist, who he calls this the occultocracy, right? That runs the show. But just on what you're talking about, Doge, I was thinking recently, there's a lot of content and analysts talking about USAID, how, they shut down Voice of America, Radio Free Liberty, which were used, as these color revolution sort of tools. And I haven't spent much time on that. And you see a lot of these influencers, we'll get to some of them, doing all these write-ups on that. And I'm like, that's irrelevant, guys. It's kind of, as you're saying, they're doing away with the legacy system because the new boss, same as the old boss, is ready to go. They don't need Voice of Liberty anymore. They don't need USAID because that's now done through Twitter X, through Pentagon Tube, as I like to call it, through DARPA LifeLog, Facebook, right? Through all of these new apps and systems and Starlinks and AIs, you don't need that stuff. So it's a, what do they call it? Like a Pyrrhic victory. So they're presenting us, oh, wow. It's like, no, we're actually going deeper, right, into the hole. Yeah.
Yeah, it's especially when you see like headlines, RFK wanting to get rid of like TV ads for big pharma, right? Nobody watches TV anymore. All the big pharma ads are on the internet. So it's like it's a non sequitur in my opinion. But I absolutely agree. I think that they're throwing all these things to the fire to get the public behind them, very much like with Trump. Both in 2016 or in 2016, 2020, and now 2024. I am under the personal belief that Joe Biden's presidency, being as catastrophic as it was sort of done intentionally to endear people towards Trump and get public sentiment behind him, as though he's fighting something that he is very provably a part of.
Oh, I fully agree with that. I think looking back in hindsight, it was almost like clownish, a very in idiocracy fashion, exaggerated the clownishness of the Biden presidency and his dementia and falling asleep and walking, in different off the stage in the wrong way. And it's like that was clearly all a setup to endear us towards, as you say, swing the pendulum towards Trump. And a number of my guests are agreeing. You were mentioning something about the cult previously.
Yeah. So just in my work, and obviously this is a little harder to prove. I try to stay on, things in the public record, like financial relations and shared board seats and stuff like that. But I do think that there is a ton of merit in looking at sort of the belief systems of these people as well. And TESCREALs come to mind a lot when talking about like transhumanism, technocracy. I believe Mark Andreessen is a self-proclaimed TESCREAL, and it sort of encompasses transhumanism, the technocratic side, and other things that I've come to understand stem from the root beliefs of like the Kabbalah. And specifically with transhumanism, technocracy being alluded to in the Tanya section of the Kabbalah, and being followed very heavily by like the Chabad Lubavitch sect of Judaism, where we see, black hats that are in the White House. That, Putin has a Chabad guy, Zelensky has a Chabad guy. There's Chabad emissaries in China, and all of these people that are sort of pushing these and largely funding a lot of them too. And I see them, tied up with Netanyahu, Elon, JD Vance, I think, was just in a video recently where he was walking through a hall, like talking to a group of them. And I don't think that it's any coincidence that where the things that are happening in the government agenda specifically are so closely aligned with the belief system of these Chabad Lubavitch guys. And I do see it as sort of a carrying forward of like Mesopotamian belief systems, largely surrounding like Saturn worship and things like that, like the black cube of Saturn and its influences on Abrahamic religions as well, which is, I think it's no surprise that we're seeing like a rise in Christianity in the United States, especially very much like we did under Reagan's term.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you're aware. I am a Christian. I come at this from a biblical worldview, but I mean, what you're saying is, I think we have to carefully walk through this minefield where, on the one hand, you've got, and I don't disagree with what you just said. You've got it's the Jews people, and it's like, wait a minute. I just saw a clip the other day of, you've got like the Talmud, you got the Torah, and then all this other stuff, and there were Jews. There are these. What do you call them? Like these Torah Jews who are not Zionists. And so they're different factions. So you can't just say it's the Jews. I grew up in Skokie, Illinois, which is a largely Jewish community, and my neighbors were Jews. It's not all. It's the Jews, and it goes back to what Mark Passio says, that there are these different factions. And what you're laying out, one cannot deny. There's mainstream reports of these things that you just mentioned. And I forget what else. And then the problem with saying it's the Jews, now you're seeing this growing current in the culture of people just loving Hitler and Nazism. And I'm like, guys, like my grandpa was a prisoner of the Nazis. There's enough primary source texts to show that the Nazis were not good guys. They labeled my people. I'm a Slav 100%. We were Untermensch. Like, how are you going to convince me, Hitler, and he was in a cult, there's people that were behind Hitler in that movement. But yeah, so and just as you say, I would agree as well that there's this strain. There's a lot of Christianity today is bad, false, fake prosperity gospel. I mean, you name it, just all wacky, really nasty stuff. I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater though. And the theosophy angle, kind of what you're talking about. I've been to a meeting of Lucis Trust when I studied in Geneva. They have an office in New York, London, and Geneva, and they believe Lucifer is the Messiah. And that he's here, and they're preparing for his unveiling, right? And so there's that stuff, and then any other thoughts on any of that, but also the technocracy angle. That's sort of my biggest fear, because I've already been banned from Patreon in 2021. The DHS took me off of PayPal, banned for life in 2022. Mexico, I can't renew my bank debit card anymore, because now the only ID they will accept is your Mexican voter ID, which is the digital ID for Mexico. And the UN and all these international world government organizations have said they want you to link your bank account to your digital ID. And so I'm putting it off for as long as possible. I have to go waste a day to get my Mexican voter ID to then be able to renew my debit card. And so it's like the walls are closing in. Yeah. Right, they're bringing in ULEZ, the 15 minutes. Mexico City is a 15-minute city. I live in Guadalajara, is a 15-minute city. They just announced another state in Mexico is going to be the capital. There is going to become 15-minute cities, and so they're rolling all this stuff out. So, and any other thoughts on the occultocracy plus the developments of the technocracy?
Yeah, I think that what you said was very important as far as people that, in my comments all the time will say, like, oh, just say Jews, just say, it's the Jews. And I try to stay away from even interacting with that because, obviously painting everyone with a broad brush and all these sweeping generalizations were one time weaponized against these people. And to see that sort of hypocrisy there is a little troubling. And, when you look at people like Pete Hegseth, right, who's a Christian, albeit Zionist Christian, but Christian nonetheless, no Judaism as far as I'm aware. He's, doing infinitely more damage to people, the state of the world and the United States military industrial complex, a million times more than like some random Joe Shlomo in like a random synagogue in Brooklyn, for example. So I think that it really just sort of not only captures a lot of people that are innocent to this when you say it's just the Jews, but it also disregards entire facets of other groups of people that are very much involved and complicit in pushing this system. So I think it is important to make that distinction. And I kind of see a lot of it as sort of like this honeypot thing where, it's allowing people to place all of their troubles and concerns just blindly on this huge, other. And, we're seeing things like the anti-Semitism bills and things like that sort of come into play. And I think it's going to end up biting a lot of people on the back end when the cards fall.
Yeah, I mean, and there's so many other groups. I mean, of course, there are these Zionist Jewish sects or groups involved. You've got King Charles and the royal family, right? He just asked Trump to become part of the British Commonwealth. And I've been saying for months and years now, I've been citing 1939, Clarence Strait. He published Union Now. He said, we want an Atlantic Union, which begins with UK, with Britain and US and Canada integrating, and from there building a world union. And so look, like now you're having Canada talk about joining European Union or creating North American Union. Like that's that Atlantic Union from 100 years ago they were talking about. There's like, it's a no-brainer. It's simple what they're doing here. And then you've got the Saudi lobby, right? Mm-hmm. They're building the ultimate, Hunger Games district in Neom. in the desert. I'm like, so they're part of this, as you mentioned, the Chinese elites, the collective Kremlin, as my past guest Yuri Roshka calls it. And so, yeah, it's one big club, and we ain't in it. Any further thoughts on the? I mean, are you freaked out about the digital dystopia? How do you see that all advancing?
It really is difficult. I think the thing that's keeping me from sort of losing my wits about everything that I see and research and stuff is, when it comes to fixing a problem, the first step's always education, awareness. So trying to understand that, everything that I take in and read, I can then pass forward to other people, to hopefully empower themselves to take the appropriate steps, which is a lot of the times why I do those association matrices and webs that people see from me, is because they're, it spans all facets of, society, government, the economy, different companies and stuff, where there may not be a direct connection, but if there's 5 or 6 different adjacent connections that sort of tie in proximity, if you go shop at a certain store and then realizing, that, BlackRock has some sort of investment ownership in that. So indirectly, by using that product, service, shopping at that store, you're funding BlackRock and their furthering of the global agenda. I think that, just to be completely transparent, I guess, with my beliefs, personally, I don't really put these out there a lot publicly, because it can be demotivating, demoralizing to people. But I do think that as far as like a mass, overturn of this digital system, just as I'm interacting with different people and stuff, seems to be less and less likely. And
you're black pilled. They're gonna say you're black pilled.
That's what I get a lot, and I like to sort of frame it as, if I was black pilled, I wouldn't be trying to educate people. I would have given up. I would have relented. What's the point? Might as well go with the flow. And I think it is important to focus on yourself as an individual and find ways for you to exit the system, exit the matrix, get off of big food, get away from big tech as much as possible. Obviously a little hypocrisy there being on X and stuff like that, but it is to try to educate other people and get that message out there and stuff. And I think that if everyone did their best to kind of focus on that, trying to save, I guess, as many people as possible from making the same mistakes that I've made in the past or that other people have made. You look at all the people that were speaking out about COVID and the COVID vaccines and how many people ended up realizing the dangers that were associated with that. I've kind of taken inspiration from that with this now coming technocracy and trying to show people, hey, people like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and his grandfather's ties to the original Technocracy Inc., that this system that we're moving to is being posited as a positive and this efficiency thing. And we're going to enter an age of abundance. And much like with the Trump presidency, I just see it as one huge Trojan horse. And if I can dispel people from that belief system and kind of help try to educate them on the various things that they can avoid or resist or boycott, maybe I can, feel good about myself at the end of my life, feeling like I made an impact and a positive change in the world.
No, I like. I agree with you. And if you've got charts you want to show us, just to give examples of the sort of the work that you do, I joke. I'm not black pilled. I'm cyanide pilled. Legal man, Lee Gallman of Jones Plantation. I've had him on the podcast, and he says he's cyanide pilled. And I think in many ways, again, my biblical worldview is a lot of this is inevitable. In the end, it fails. They don't succeed. I know when that end is, but it's going to be like the movie Sparta, right? The 300 movie.
Yeah,
you're going to be in this fight to the death, and so chipping away at the beast, as you said. How can I look my kids in the eye to be a coward? And so just participating in the fight as much as, we can talk about, I want to get your thoughts on Alex Jones, but he used to say, what did he say? Resistance is victory or something like that. Just the act of resisting, even if you're going to be thrown in a concentration camp or executed, that alone for me is true, that it's kind of like, victory. And I agree with you. Trump, the whole Trump thing is Jason Christoff. I've had him on the podcast, hung out with him a few months ago. He just gave an interesting interview where he said he's pulling back from the truth movement because people were starting to wake up with COVID, and then they got boomeranged back into the psyop with MAGA 2.0. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like I'm posting memes and people are attacking me who are in love with Trump. And I'm like, how do you not see what's going on? It's like, I can't understand how people who saw through COVID 1984 don't see what you just outlined. Peter Thiel, who's Bilderberg, right, behind Trump and Musk. And yeah, I don't know. And further thoughts if you want to show some of that.
I think a big part of it was definitely the Q movement. I think they sort of set us back 20, 30 years as far as trying to reach that like collective actual truth and saying, you're seeing one thing, but don't believe that. I mean, that just ties back to the like, don't believe your lying eyes sort of mentality that we get from like 1984 and things of that nature. I think that I'll go ahead and share one of these webs here. So I do a live stream every Wednesday where I try to have other people assist in building these various webs and stuff, because I've very quickly come to realize it is way too much work for one person. There's things you could overlook or miss, or certain biases you can have. And I like to call it crowdsourcing the truth. Where, if we can all collectively just sort of pitch in our knowledge and things like that, our expertise, that maybe one day we could sort of have a rough system that maps out everything. Now, whether that's through me or through a collective effort or someone else, whoever it ends up being, I just would love to see that and for people to have that to reference and stuff. But this is one that over about 3 streams, I think, I've built with my chat and my community, and it specifically ties in Elon Musk and Peter Thiel together, who I see as sort of the 2 main proponents of this current technocracy system. There's obviously other people at play, Curtis Yarvin, David Sachs, Howard Lutnick, so on and so forth. But this right here, so we started with just box that had Peter Thiel in his picture and Elon Musk in his picture, and then getting like the direct connections between them, such as like co-investments. They were both part of PayPal. PayPal absorbed Elon's online bank from the 90s, X.com. You had PayPal and its ties to FieldLink, but then all the people from the PayPal mafia that I'm still trying to slowly map out here. I'm going to have to reorganize some things. But seeing like Thiel's, investment in SpaceX or, Neuralink, he doesn't, as far as I'm aware, doesn't invest directly in Tesla, but a Thiel Fellowship recipient, Austin Russell, contributes some of his LiDAR technology to Tesla. So sort of like an indirect thing there. And, obviously there's Twitter and Rumble and OpenAI is something that Elon and Peter Thiel both invested in together, even though Elon is sort of playing that, he's doing his own thing on the side. I think that the false 2-party dichotomy that we sort of see in politics also extends to this business sector and the private sector as well. And people who are aligned in their goals and motivations will often act as, they're in conflict with each other when actually they're both pushing the exact same thing and just sort of catering it to 2 different audiences based on certain talking points, philosophies, what have you.
And maybe just on that point, we'll keep references for later if we get to asking you about just your big picture thoughts on geopolitics in the world with so-called Third World War. 10 years ago, there was someone, a friend that I had that worked in the oil, petroleum, energy industry in Russia. Mm-hmm. And this was like 2016, 2017, and there was all this. For the last 20 years, we had this talk about new Cold War, right? New Cold War with Russia. And I'm like, oh, so you're working in Russia. No, he's not there anymore, but and he wasn't a Russian. And I'm like, what's any thoughts on this whole new Cold War talk? It's like 2015, 16, maybe 17. And he's like, oh no, it's like, behind, like, are you kidding me? He's like, behind the scenes, the American corporations and American businessmen and the Russians, they're making money hand over fist. So it's like on the news, we're seeing you Cold War Russia, Medvedev says something against Hillary and Trump. It's kind of like, but behind the scenes, they're making boatloads of cash. And it's kind of exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. And, especially with like the AI race that's going on right now, we had Operation Stargate come out. A lot of people were upset about that, but rightfully so. And then you suddenly have like these news stories coming out of China with things like DeepSeek. So now it's, instead of AI is bad, it's we need to advance our AI and make it better and invest more because look what China's doing. We don't want to fall behind. And I think there's actually a news story coming out now about Chinese humanoid robots, sort of it being really advanced and working in factories and creating this abundance for China. And I think that's going to be posited because the timing with Howard Lutnick talking about the $30,000 Tesla robot, Elon saying there's going to be more humanoid robots than people in, the coming decade or so. And I just sort of see it as this like ratchet effect, right? Where one side will sort of push things a little bit and then that causes inspiration and sort of gets the public to buy into, well, we need to do this as well. And in actuality, it's just sort of corralling us towards this same point, right?
That's a cheap trick. I mean, it's like, oh, look, China has this big bad, and the Western propaganda media, the mainstream and alternative media are like, oh, China is this boogeyman, and they got social credit system. It's like, well, we need one that's bigger and better, right? Musk is like, we need the WeChat, American WeChat, or Belt and Road and BRICS and Eurasian Union, and well, now we need a North American Union. I've seen some of the articles actually argue that one of the reasons we need to integrate Canada, USA, is because of China. And it's just kind of like, when are people going to get it?
Yeah, and when we look back at COVID and realize that basically every major world government were saying the same things, doing the same things, despite their what was supposed to be like clear differences, adversarial positions and stuff. But they're all colluding on this global pandemic and the relief programs and funneling money between each other. And it's like when it really comes down to the important things like war, profit, control, that's where they all end up, being on the same team and doing the same things. And I think the rest of it is just sort of theater to endear the public that there is still some sort of division and that, where America's better or different than any of the other countries over in the East and things like that.
Yeah. Feel free again to share charts whenever, but want to get your thoughts maybe on the financial, the dollar, the Bitcoin and crypto. My view hasn't changed from the beginning. I interview Bitcoin maxis, Bitcoin experts, some of them that were big names. And so I talk to everyone, to get kind of different views on the table. But I just can't shake my from day one thesis that Bitcoin, Mark Goodwin has said as much, that Bitcoin was created by them, by the elites. This was all strategically planned. And my thesis, it's just like you sit back. I don't even need to know the details. It's just clear what they're doing is we know their end game. We just reverse engineer. And Bitcoin, the purpose was to whet people's appetites. In Spanish, we say como the enganche, like it's like that first kind of getting your attention because there was greed involved. So they play with human nature, and a lot of people got rich. Unfortunately, I didn't, but so they whet people's appetites, like with all these Bitcoin and Ethereum, all these different currencies. So a lot of people got rich. They got used to digital payments, and so that would be then the bridge to CBDCs, or what I call PBDCs, private bank digital currencies, like the stable coins. And it's both the same. It's like, you want Brave New World, or you want 1984. You want China 1984, you want West Brave New World. And so my thesis is this is all to bring in the cashless systems. What are your thoughts when it comes to this space?
I absolutely agree. When when I first started hearing about it back in, I think it was 2012, 2013, I was young and dumb again in that period of my life. And I was like, oh, wow, there's this, new alternative currency and it's not tied to international banking and things like that before I really understood it or did any digging. And I have been working on sort of this web that ties, encryption and cryptography and things like that all the way back to people that are associated with like the Nobel family and their involvements with various military industrial complex, and there's companies like AG Crypto or AB Cryptography. They've kind of changed their name a couple times that worked with various governments, but align themselves with the United States government to create like cryptography machines to transmit encrypted messages back and forth between different countries and try to keep them secure. All the while, we're giving like the keys to these cryptography machines to the American government so they could decipher all of them anyway. And through things like Operation Thesaurus, Operation GA, Operation Rubicon. Here, I can actually share this web here. So I've done some digging into like the history of Bitcoin and how, I think we all know that the SHA 256 standard of encryption was created and patented by the NSA, and that's what Bitcoin was created from. The whole Satoshi email itself is a story that was propagated by Nick Szabo, Hal Finney, Adam Back. Nick Szabo and Hal Finney. Hal Finney, first of all, works on the Alcor Life Extension Foundation. And Nick Szabo was part of this BitGold essay, How to Make a Mint, the Cryptography of Anonymous Electric Cash, it says this research essay was prepared by NSA employees in furtherance of study of cryptography, so on and so forth. But they both are self-admitted extropian transhumanists. And I see transhumanism and technocracy is sort of one and the same. Technocracy is going to be relying on this digital currency system. And I think that with all of the psychological operations that happen, military intelligence, they sort of knew that, much like with things like Google and Amazon and those sort of private sector things, that if they pitched it as a non-government product or service, that it would get people to trust it. Because if the government just came out with Bitcoin, right, everyone would be completely against it. But you start to see all of these, different belief systems and stuff of these people, and realizing that, this is the thing that they believe in and want to move towards. Adam Back has a company called Blockstream that is connected to like Horizon Adventures and AXA Strategic Adventures, which Li Ka-shing is a Chinese billionaire. He's also helping to push some of these things. He has a few holdings of himself, but when you go back through the SHA 256 and you see like the NSA with the SIS, and you start getting all these different operations like Rubicon, the Gentleman's Agreement, you start bringing in like Crypto International and various Swedish businesses and all of those government operations. I was speaking about like Operation Thesaurus, Spartan, and you go back and you can kind of see where encryption itself started as these same like private entities and eventually ended up merging with things like the NSA and the CIA and being incorporated very heavily into their operations and methodology. And it just seems like we're seeing sort of the same play where, it's promised that it's going to be this secure, encrypted, private thing, but there is a completely public ledger that ties everybody and all their holdings together. And I do think that secretly the government has the resources to be able to demystify and de-anonymize those same sort of systems, because it was the same thing they were doing to countries in like World War I, World War II. And you can read a lot of this on like I can't remember if it's the crypto museum or the Bitcoin history museum, but there's a website out there that sort of breaks down every single thing that's happened as far as the development and launch of cryptography as a government operation, and how it was involved in these different wars and psychological operations, covert operations, to sort of benefit the government. And I think we're just sort of seeing that now, and Bitcoin being a merger with the financial institution. So not only are they able to, get all of this information and things from people in what I would call like a data honeypot, but now also they're able to sort of siphon money away from private investors who are in these, have major investors such as Howard Lutnick, who I think just last week or earlier this week said that he has hundreds of millions in Bitcoin, and people like Larry Fink and BlackRock owning massive amounts, where with companies and, the fiat currencies that we have in place right now, like if the dollar crashes, we can hold the government accountable. If, a stock crashes, you can hold that company accountable, where Bitcoin sort of absolves, and other cryptos sort of absolve that responsibility away. And it can be just sort of chalked up to like, oh, well, it's inevitability of the free market. And
what do you think the play is here? Because I don't know, because there's smart people who have different theses. Like Catherine Austin Fitts says they are getting the taxpayers to pump, they're pumping up the Bitcoin price, and then the system, the Lutniks, the Trump administration, the U.S. government, once the price is high, they're going to swap that out to buy real assets, and then the price will crash, and that a lot of people will lose money. I could see that as one scenario. I could see another scenario where it seems like they're trying. We went from gold-backed dollar. Then Bretton Woods, 1971, Bretton Woods 2.0 was the oil-backed dollar, and they're talking about Bretton Woods 3.0 to have, I guess, this digital gold-backed, digital currency-backed dollar or energy certificate, right? Going back to technocracy, the goal is to create these energy sort of credits, and so I'm on the fence. I mean, I don't know. Are they? It seems like they could succeed in somehow pushing through this carbon. You've talked about that carbon sort of energy credit system, and maybe the Bitcoin and stable coins and all that space is needed for this, or it just simply crashes, as you say, and they just say, "Oh, look, and look what happened with Bitcoin." That could be used as the pretext to say, "Look, we need these regulated central bank digital currencies." Thoughts?
Yeah. Now, obviously, it's a little hard to completely determine. So a lot of this is just sort of my speculation. But we're seeing things like the establishment of the crypto strategic reserve, and I do ultimately think that the goal is to push people to only have the ability to have digital currency, and I think that what we'll end up seeing, and this is just my theory again, is we'll see this huge inflation like we've seen with Bitcoin over the recent years, and that being the excuse to offset, like, get rid of our gold. Why do we need gold when Bitcoin's so expensive? It's more secure, and get us away from physical assets as much as possible. When it comes to the ownership portion of it, you can physically defend your physical assets, your actual commodities that you own, like gold and precious metals and things like that. And this whole crypto thing, I mean, we've seen countless stories over the years of people getting hacked, and one person overnight could just, well, maybe not one person, but a few people can sort of collaborate together to crash a crypto market. We see that all the time happening with like meme coins and stuff, right? They'll get people invested early, amass these huge amounts, and then launch it. And then all of their buddies will sell off their stake and crash the coin, take everyone's actual money, and pocket it for themselves. So I think what we're going to see is as we keep going, the market's going to have all of these crashes and stuff that I think are being perpetuated by a lot of these elite figures who are trying to like devalue people's wealth, take their money, and profit along the way, all while sort of tiptoeing us through different things like the Solana chain and stuff like that to digital only as an eventuality. So I think that we're going to see what I think is going to be like a selling off of a lot of American land or other assets and sort of tokenize them. I think Larry Fink even said like he wants to tokenize everything. So, every tomato in the grocery store will end up having some sort of token ID system to it so they can see who bought it, the exchange of that from one person to another, because you'll have to have some sort of record or something like that. And that's just sort of a small example, but even on like a wide scale, seeing all of these institutional investment companies push towards crypto and the ledger system and things like that, it's sort of this decentralized centralization. So even though we have a ton of different cryptos all over the place and they all claim to be decentralized, in the end, it's all still funneling up to the same people who were, taking advantage of the international institutional banking systems, and we're just furthering the enrichment of the elite. So I think that the goal ultimately is digital currency for everyone, while they own all of the physical assets and the keys to the ledgers, and they can tell what people are doing, who they're transacting with, and build profiles and so on and so forth, and tie all of that to carbon and energy. I do think the carbon tax credit system is going to be, it's sort of serving like the precursor to that energy price system, especially from the original technocrats, doing their energy survey and trying to push that as well. So that, I guess, long story short, I do see all of these cryptos as normalizing digital only currency, tracked currency, that ledger system and things like that, where we won't be able to hide. But, just given history and the patterns with that they'll have their own sort of methods and systems where they won't be prone to that same sort of scrutiny, transparency, and surveillance.
And it's funny, every time I go to the grocery store here in Mexico or the convenience store, I'm checking it out, and the clerk is like, "Your phone number," and I'm like, I respond in an aggressive tone. I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
It's like, well, but the fact that it's become normalized, like the next person be like, "Oh yeah, here's my phone number," and the next person like, "Oh yeah, here's my phone number," and I'm like the outlier where it's like, my phone number. Like it's like what, and then the next thing, it's insane, and I don't have time. I just have in years, like I think for many of us, we've just dropped off of paying attention to mainstream news, Hollywood entertainment, films, video games. Once a year or twice maybe. I like video games, and it's kind of escapist, right? It's therapy, and so I'll play some stuff once in a while. And I was just started last night. I started watching Silo, this TV show. And it's the same principle of like 1984, people locked in a silo, and it's clear that they're told if they go out, they're going to die because of the nuclear radiation or something. But then you see the screen, they're showing a false reality. And it's actually, I haven't seen, I'm just starting it, but it seems like outside is normal, and they're being kept in this sort of silo cage. Plato's cave allegory as well. And as you said, I had a recent guest where we talked about it's decentralized but centralized, and the globalist white papers themselves, they're publishing Project Syndicate, Nicholas Berggruen Institute. He's got a magazine called Noema. They've been recently writing about, to have this planetary government, world government, we need to also work at the local level. And they're talking about, they're using the phrase often now, city states, kind of like feudal city states. And we have these network states and cyber states, right? These projects in Honduras and elsewhere. So it's like they're going to have network city states, and somehow that's going to integrate with the world government. And if you think logically, it's like if you have a nation state and you dismantle the nation state, so it doesn't have as much power, and you break power down to these small chunks that are then easier to control versus nation states. My parents were born in Yugoslavia. I'm not a fan of communist Yugoslavia, but it was more powerful six nations in one versus separate six countries that you can. Then they reintegrated it into the European Union. I'm going on a rant here, but any other thoughts on the long-term agendas? We've covered a number of them. Transhumanism. It looks like some of these freaks are trying to obtain immortality. You look at Peter Thiel. He honestly looks sickly.
Yeah.
Like he looks worse than those of us who just live a normal life. And Brian Johnson just launched Don't Die. Like this guy actually thinks he's not going to die. Just any other thoughts on some of the aspects of the end game that they have?
Yeah, I actually have a model. Now, I will admit that some things are not included in it yet just because of my limited understanding of the concepts, which I'm trying to fix. Things like the Internet of Bodies or W-band, things that are, I think, very important to the conversation. But I have this model here that is what I consider like the most simple model to explain it to people as sort of.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I think you posted it, and I thought it was very, very good.
I appreciate that. So I always like to start with like the nuclear AI powered plants, because it's no secret that big tech is now completely inundated with AI in every single step. Just doing some research last year, I noticed that companies like Microsoft is making deals for like nuclear facilities. Google is also moving into nuclear energy. Amazon, Meta. All of these different companies. I believe Elon has expressed interest in nuclear powered data facilities as well. And I see these as sort of the way for them to power all of these, nationwide data centers. We have over 500 data centers in just the state of Virginia alone. And then you also have, 200 to 300 in California, you have 200 to 300 in Texas, and all of these. And then obviously that extends out as a pattern to the rest of the world. And I think that's sort of where that decentralized centralization comes into play there, where, if you, let's say worst case scenario, this is hypothetically, I don't commend this or anything, but physically destroy one of these data centers. Well, now there's 15, 16 others, in the area that serve as nodes that would sort of be able to pick up that slack and stuff and sort of create this indestructible network of data centers that all interoperate together through things like the cloud. You have Larry Ellison's Oracle, Microsoft as well. This is sort of where this global cloud comes into play here. You have the Google Cloud, you have Amazon Web Services, you have all of these cloud computing things that can sort of funnel all of the data from various locations and integrate it together. It can be, extrapolated through like SQL, JSON, fed into different things, and sort of house all of this data virtually. So even if you destroy like the physical aspects of whatever's storing that, they have backups and so on and so forth. And then there's the global satellite connection. So, Elon launching rockets, all big tech sort of partnering with different satellite companies as well. And they're wanting to, from my understanding, create this space cloud. There's an article that I saw that said the space cloud satellite strategies for AWS, Google, Microsoft. And you see things like Starlink partnering with T-Mobile and offering coverage for them. Elon trying to push Starlink as this thing that can connect you no matter where you are in the world. My personal viewpoint is they're trying to make sure there's nowhere in the world that you can hide. And they want to make sure you're always on, always connected to this system so they can update things like their, carbon credit blockchain ledger and where you're going and geolocation data and stuff.
And I totally agree. And I just had just additional thought to what you're outlining here, the space cloud. It's almost like, and you mentioned the physical data centers. It's like they're removing it even further from us into space so that eventually there'd be almost no way we could actually fight back against this once it's established. No? I'm like, how will we attack anything in space?
Yeah, and that's sort of been my biggest concern, and seeing like people like Elon Musk getting all these government contracts, not only from the U.S. but with basically every government in the world. It seems like providing that coverage in Ukraine. I think he used the Russia-Ukraine conflict as a way to get that satellite coverage over there and get his system implemented there. And he's always bragging on, different posts of, oh, now this country that didn't have internet, or this small remote island or place in the world didn't have internet. Now they can access, things and communicate with people, when in reality, I think it's all just going to be surveillance, and we won't be able to, like you said, like the average person can't just take a rocket up there and start, trying to dismantle these things. And the interoperability with like 5G cell towers and stuff, again, like Elon Musk and T-Mobile have this sort of partnership where his satellites can bounce off of T-Mobile cell towers, and it's just sort of like coating this whole world in like not only EMF but also this global connection that I think is going to sort of make sure that nobody is able to, maybe if you go into a cave system or something like deep down in there, you might have some luck or something, but
yeah, and I'll just add, from my recent research in the past 2 weeks, again, you think of Orwell, and the world government is based on of a foundation of, or we can use the term, multipolarity for me is just a synonym for world government, and they have 3 blocks or 3 poles, and you mentioned Starlink, and so it seems like for Oceania, for a large part of the West, they're covering it with SpaceX Starlink. I mean, I've got a Starlink rank behind me. It's like it goes back to what you're using X, and it's kind of like as guerrilla warfare. The guerrilla information warfare that we're doing. We use whatever tools are available to us, and it's kind of like understanding all of this. But so they're rolling out Starlink, and I just read we've got 3 major sort of satellite internet providers. Starlink in the West. They just announced China. I forget the name of theirs, but China is launching theirs, which is going to go to 30 countries. I guess principally in the global south. So they're going to get that area covered. And then the EU is launching, I think it's called EU's Satell Intel or something like that, where they're launching their no, I don't think any other regions have, and Russia doesn't have stuff like this. And so they're going to have everything covered, I think, with the Chinese, with the DARPA Pentagons, Musk, and the EU.
Absolutely. And you have to think, like, if you just have a bunch of satellites up there just randomly floating around with no coordination with each other, like inevitably you would think that there'd be the ability for them to crash into each other, interfere with each other. And I think that through things like, especially here in America, the FCC, FTC, getting all of these companies to work together, I think all it would take is the flip of a switch to integrate all of these systems together with each other and sort of merge them all together. And I think that is an eventuality that we're going to see with the varying different satellite companies, all these big tech companies having their own, eventually it's all just going to funnel into, it could be Oracle or some other sort of proprietary data storage system. But I think eventually we'll slowly start to see the surveillance efforts consolidate like we have with business over the last 100, 200 years or so. Now, obviously, they need things that will enforce these rules, regulations, policies on people. And I think that's where the humanoid robots sort of come into play. You don't have to deal with things like people having this moral conflict, when it comes to things like the military or the police, because you'll have these morally, devoid robots that will be able to, we're seeing reports of the United States military and other militaries around the world already start to integrate these humanoid robots. I've seen some where it's like the Boston Dynamics dog robots that we've seen in the past that just has like a mounted machine gun on it and like a targeting system, and being able to use those things and trying to sell the robots to people with all of their cameras, microphones. I mean, not to fearmonger or anything, but you invite this thing into your house. Not only are you paying for it out of your own pocket, but it's promised that it's going to fold your laundry when, it could be, given the directive to, oh, this person's been a little too dissident, or, this person is a suspected terrorist, and then the robot breaks in your room and tries to murder you.
Yeah, yeah, that most definitely, and not to mention, you mentioned the robodogs, the humanoids, the autonomous the drone swarms. It's that metalhead from Black Mirror, where if they've got just swarms of drones. I mean, Palmer Lucky's company Anduril is developing these insane long distance autonomous drones that are quiet. You don't even hear them, and yeah, I think we're screwed.
It's looking a little bit that way, and again, I hate the whole term black pill, because it just seems like the new age conspiracy theorist label. But at some point, I think that people have to be realistic with themselves, and understand that all these things are really happening in the world. All of these systems are slowly being built out and coming together, and use that not to despair and like harangue on what's coming, but use that as motivation to like do everything you can to resist and escape it as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten annoyed with anyone anymore who comments a black pillar. I'm like, okay, white pill me. Give me your solution. I'll follow you, right? What's your solution? Vote for Trump. Like, are you serious? Like, come on, So maybe to ask you then about the alt media. Right? Influencers, alternative media. It's just disappointing in many ways to see so many people, I think many of us listen to turn out to do complete 180s. I use Alex Jones as one example, because in the 2000s, he helped guide me towards the G. Edward Griffins and Creature from Jekyll Island. And, it's just funny. I've told this story before. G. Edward Griffin took me out to lunch in 2011 because I was a volunteer for his website, and I happened to be passing through town. And so I got to meet some of my heroes. And then Alex Jones used to talk about, North American Union bad. It's a globalist project. And literally when Trump said, let's integrate Canada, USA, which is North American Union, Jones is like, yes, let's do it. And I'm like, what? And so it's clear he's a globalist now. The Mr. Anti-globalist is globalist, and he's cheerleading us now. And it goes back to 1984 and George Orwell and O'Brien and Emmanuel Goldstein and the book, which was created by the system. So the system created the opposition to sort of corral true dissidents back into the system to ensure that there are no dissidents. And I feel like alt media is now just chock full of these actors, the security state. They've attacked me, so they snuck into alt media in the past 2 years. There have been these alt media accounts doing write-ups on me and others. They spent enough energy to write an actual article about geopolitics and empire and myself, saying I'm a Russian agent. And then on another occasion, they said I was a right-wing fascist neo-Nazi. It's weird because I married a brown person and I'm a Mexican national. So it's like, why would a white supremacist do something like that? Anyways, but just your thoughts on the whole alt media influencer space, because I trust very few people now in that space.
I'm right there with you. And I think one problem that we have is that trust somewhere along the way stopped being earned. And it's like people can make a couple quick, cheap talking points that really resonate with people on a personal level, and that they automatically get buy-in. I really have to thank Polly St. George. She has done some work on like the Rumble network, sphere of influencers and things like that. And what I've come to understand is that a lot of the state-funded media on legacy television and stuff is sort of moving away because people don't watch TV. And with things like the change to the Smith-Mundt Act that Obama signed in 2012, that allowed the United States government to disseminate information and media from the State Department to U.S. citizens domestically. I think that really opened the door to what we saw with like fake news. We saw the rise of Tucker Carlson happen very, very quickly after that. A lot of people don't know that his father, Dick Carlson, was head of the same U.S. information agency, or I think like the associate director of that same agency that was prohibited from disseminating that propaganda. And he was nominated by Reagan at the height of the Cold War when, disinformation campaigns were sort of being pushed in mass, not only in the United States, but globally. And when I also have a web for this if you'd be interested in that.
Sure.
But
yeah, it's like, I mean, they did away with the legacy. It's what I said earlier, doing away with Radio Liberty, Voice of America, because the news system is ready, and they just switch. It's like Alex Jones has become the new Fox News effectively.
Yeah, it's one time I made the statement that Alex Jones is just Fox News mixed with QVC, because it seems like every 5 minutes he's pushing some other product of his, like CMOS, colloidal silver, his T-shirts and stuff. And like, I know you got to make a living, but it seems like he gives just as much airtime to his advertising his products as he does trying to. I would say it's give information, but I don't think I think it's closer to propaganda these days.
No, yeah, I mean, and that's what I like. One of many inspirations for me was InfoWars, and then I started doing this in 2012, and a lot of the guests he used to have early on have been on my pod, and I would seek them out because my whole point, I liked it when he had guests on, and you try to listen to his guests. He was always interrupting them. But early on, he had William Engdahl, who I've interviewed over a half dozen times, Francis Boyle, who just passed, and all these different people, and he's kind of stopped doing that so much. And then you see other, Candace Owens, it's just all these odd things where she's connected to Andrew Tate, who I've got nothing good to say about Andrew Tate. And then, she, after meeting some British dude with strange connections, after a few weeks later or something, they're marrying, and then they've all got connections to Tate. It's like something weird is going on.
Yeah, I honestly think, there's a saying, once you're intelligence, you're always intelligence. And I sort of see the Daily Wire, and I'm probably going to get some sort of consequence for this, but whatever. But I think the Daily Wire is very clearly a Mossad operation to, influence American perception and public opinion. And I'm under the belief that anyone that is coming from Daily Wire is sort of falsely pushed out under tension or pretenses to build them up as like this character that you can trust. I was betrayed by Ben Shapiro and this institutional online information company, and we've seen the same thing with Trump, right? Where, the entirety of the 2024 election cycle, he was put in prison and, had that mugshot. He was out a few minutes later. They supposedly shot at him, tried to assassinate him multiple times. He got sued various times, and all that did was make people like him more. And I think that they create these trials and tribulations to get people more endeared and sort of relent that trust into these people so that they can ultimately just sort of steer them towards the same objectives. Especially with people like Andrew Tate, and I'll share this web here, but you look at some of the like common sponsorships, and I think that's sort of how this money is being funneled, not only through like social media monetization, which is a huge blind spot for like financial campaign financial regulations, where a campaign could pay for an advertising promotion for a specific creator, and then that specific creator goes on to endorse that person or those talking points. And when you go look at like the FEC website, all you see is the campaign made X amount of dollars as a contribution to the social media company. It doesn't say what it's for, who's it going to, is this for ads, or is it ads for yourself, or is it ads for someone else to boost them in the algorithm, which I think does wonders for creating like new characters and stuff. I mean, it's no secret that I do not like Ian Carroll, and that his rise to prominence and stuff has been very questionable. Very early on in like 2024, he was retweeted by Michael Flynn for one of his Epstein videos, and then got tagged like Liz Crokin and like all these people that are in the Flynn network. And I don't think that that was just a coincidence or happenstance, especially seeing him sort of try to lead people into trusting not only the government, but specifically the Trump administration, despite mountains and mountains of evidence that he was going to be pro-Israel, pro-technocracy, backed by Peter Thiel, picking J.D. Vance, things like that. But I've noticed that like various sponsorships that people share will often tie them together when you look at things like their talking points, their principles. 1775 Coffee, just as an example, has sponsored Steven Crowder, Andrew Tate, Laura Loomer, Russell Brand, Fresh and Fit, has had, which is Myron Gaines and Walter Weeks. They've had a sponsorship by 1775 Coffee before. Dave Rubin has had one himself. They're actually like plastered on the website. You can go, to 1775coffee.com and see that. And when you go back and look, you can see that 1775 Coffee is a part of this thing called the Stardust Group, which is owned and operated by Foster Colson of Colson Capital. And he owns different brands like Z-Stack supplements. You have like I think it's called Unvaxxed or something like that. That Positive food brand. It's like a pet food brand. Do you remember when Laura Loomer ate dog food on her live stream?
I try to avoid Laura Loomer.
I don't blame you.
Right.
There was a clip of her eating dog food from this company called Positive that is also owned and operated by the same Colson Capital. And, I think that not only served as potentially a humiliation ritual or something like that for her, but, just showing that these companies can influence these people not only to do crazy things on camera and potentially, their talking points and stuff like that. I mean, do you remember the Tim Pool tenant media? And
yeah, actually, I mean, what I said earlier, so it was funny. I kind of was making it a big deal and people weren't quite understanding. So that was last year in September, the tenant media. So in July of last year, these anonymous X accounts, one of them was called Eyes of the Republic. And he was doing these write-ups on Russian agents in alt media, including myself. So this is July 2024. And I'm like, okay, something's going on here. So July, he does a write-up on me. August, Scott Ritter has his home raided and Dmitry Shimes. And then September, you have the whole Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, tenant media thing. And so you can now, in hindsight, you can see the buildup. So in July, they started the process of calling out, developing, profiles on alt media as Russian agents. This is slander against me, and I poop equally on Trump as I do on Putin and Xi Jinping. So, and then the whole tenant media thing happened. So, anyways, I just wanted to give that sort of backstory where it's clear now what I said was true, that this was security state in alt media building up to the whole Tim Pool tenant media thing.
Absolutely. And it's even more concerning too, when you start to realize that, like, even taking that Colson Capital web there, like the wellness company, which, pushed the ivermectin narrative, Donald Trump Jr. is now a part of that. Tucker Carlson has platformed the wellness company, and that they provide all sorts of sponsorships to various people. That's also part of this International Health Brands Foster Colson thing. Someone that sits on the board with Foster Colson on this International Health Brands is a guy named David Lopez, who has ties to Blackwater. And that's where Eric Prince starts to come in. And you see, I mean, you remember Dan Bongino's hearing where Eric Prince was literally sitting right beside him. And Dan Bongino's on my web. I haven't dug specifically into everything that sponsored him, but I mean, him, Chris Pavlovsky over Rumble, who's now some sort of official media capacity in the White House, and people like, Twitter profiles like Cat Turd, all like pushing the same Dunkin' Donuts boycott. Well, it turns out that, 1775 coffee was launching about that time. And you can start to see these patterns. I think Sodagate was one that just happened this week, where we're seeing people copy paste the same talking points. And it's all these high profile influencers that are supposed to be completely independent. And turns out they're all just taking money to speak on behalf of these different sponsors. And I think that's where like the carrot stick sort of thing comes into play, where, though, if they find somebody that I think is popular or becomes popular, whether it came from them directly or it's just somebody that's grown organically, and they say, hey, well, if you sponsor this coffee company, or if you let us sponsor you, we'll give you money, but you have to talk about this certain topic, or you have to stay away from, highlighting these certain stories. Like with Tim Pool specifically, I mean, he basically refuses to talk about anything that's critical of Israel, for example. And I'm almost wondering if there's some sort of multi-layered funneling of money into that to sort of incentivize him to stay away from conversations like that.
Yeah, and when I fell down this rabbit hole, when I uncovered like everything you're laying out here, I just started unsubscribing from all of these networks. I don't want anything to do with them. You mentioned Roger Stone. I wouldn't want to have him as a guest, because it's kind of like he's part of this system. And I hope people forgive me. I think for a year I had a subscription to Blaze TV. This was maybe the late 2000 teens or early 2020. But again, it's a process that we all sort of snap out of the stupor. And even Rumble, as an example, which is sold as this anti-system, anti-globalist, Pentagon tube alternative. It's like, I saw on my Rumble account, yeah, I've got one. I've got Odyssey, BitChute, Brightcon, and everything I can have. Just got kicked off of Rockfin. But I saw I had generated my first couple $100 on Rumble, and the only way to pay out is PayPal, which I'm banned from, and PayPal, which was links to Thiel, who's got links to Rumble. How is this anti-dissident if PayPal is the only option that you have? And so, yeah, any sort of parting thoughts on the alt media, on this whole alt media space. And one of my recent guests, Richard Poe, he calls it sheep dipping. It goes back again to that Gold's 1984, where they sheep dip, Trump and Alex Jones, all this false persecutions to sort of try to develop street creds, to be believable, but it's a psyop.
Absolutely. I'll say that I think the best thing that you can do is don't ever become endeared with the messenger, right? You always want to focus on the message, the things they're saying. You want to practice discernment at every step. I tell people constantly, like, don't even trust me. Like, go vet the things that I'm saying and verify for yourself and think for yourself. And don't just take everything I say at face value. Not only am I human and capable of making mistakes, but I have my own set of biases sometimes. I think that's inescapable. But if you can teach people the steps and methodologies to go vet these different people and really ask, not focusing so much on the things they're saying, but why they're saying these things. What are they hoping to accomplish by sharing these specific talking points? And I think especially just a rule of thumb for me is any influencer that is trying to endear you to the state or government or some sort of global coalition is automatically against your best interests, and you should write them off completely, because the government is the number one source of oppression in the world. And I think historically that's always been the case. So anyone that's trying to, be pro-Trump, even pro-Biden, pro-Russia, pro-China, pro-anything, the second someone's trying to get me to like these things, I'm like, okay, I don't trust you anymore. And I don't think I ever will.
No, I mean, that's, and then when you mention Ian Carroll or whoever who are trying to get us to believe in a party, I'm looking at this from the Christian perspective. Like, man is corrupt, sinful, evil by nature, fallible. If you extrapolate that, so is the state. Mm-hmm. So the state is corrupt. It's, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I don't want nothing to do with the state. I don't believe it. And especially at this point, I think we've reached a point in history where, with what happened in 2020, all states across the board have proven that they are now against us, and there's no going back. There's absolutely no going. I mean, the things that are happening in Mexico here with the Mexican state, where the Mexican police are kidnapping and dismembering citizens. It's like, you want me to believe in the government when they're literally killing us? But just real quick, thought on World War III. There's all this hubbub about Russia, Iran. We'll probably go to a war with Iran and probably with China. I don't know. I'm on the fence that it's either a psyop where it's like a slow burner where they got these conflicts going and they want to psyop us into giving up national sovereignty for world government, or they could just as easily go to a total war scenario, which they could use to their advantage to rebuild, world government 3.0. Did you have any thought on this hype of World War III?
Yeah, I do think that we've seen throughout history in various texts that the war between Israel and Iran is the what's going to kick off, I guess, essentially World War III, and I think that we're seeing sort of a coming together of that, this like Mashiach apocalyptic end times narrative that's coming from a lot of religious sects. As well as, the same false dichotomy, because at the end of the day, all of the countries that are going to end up going to war with each other are provided weaponry by, weapons manufacturers, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, things like that. And I think that most war and conflict these days is just sort of trading violence for profit. And I do very well see World War III being something that they could try to establish as a very real thing to bring in, this burning down of the old government systems and throwing things in disarray, mass culling of people, and bringing about this technocratic system and getting everybody under the one world government. I even see things like UFO disclosure, I think is sort of used a lot to fearmonger people as there's a looming alien threat. We did like an Emmanuel Goldstein type of character, where we need to be able to unite as one world so that we can never have another world war after World War III, or we have to take on the aliens that are, trying to, come blow up the planet or whatever that looks like. I think everything that's the goal, is they want to connect everyone together. They want to have one system. I think it's going to be a digital system. And I think with this, like Mashiach narrative, especially, you see like them attempting to rebuild Solomon's temple. Well, in my end game map that I have, I think that the central computer that's sort of going to feed everything, or like the central point, whatever that may be, whether it's off-world, satellite sort of data center, space cloud, whatever that looks like, whatever all these things are going to feed into, I believe that is their new Solomon's temple. And I think that they're going to manufacture this apocalyptic end time prophecy so that they can do these things, because that's what they believe. And they think that they're able to manufacture their way through this prophecy so that they can fulfill their own belief system.
Yeah, and you hit my next question, which was UFOs and aliens. And RT, just Russia Today, published a tweet just before we connected. Mysterious bright spirals in multiple Russian cities. France, Poland, and Germany also report sighting. It's like Will Smith's Independence Day type of scenario. And I commented, we are ready for the fallen angel, quote, extraterrestrial false flag, let her rip. I'm of the opinion that UFO phenomenon is real, but that they are fallen angels. Jacques Vallée, who was just on Joe Rogan, and I followed his work. The sources for creating my thesis was, of course, the Bible, but also Jacques Vallée and J. Allen Hynek, who say it's an interdimensional phenomenon, the UFOs. And so, but it's kind of goes to what you're saying. Greer, who I'm not a fan of, but he says one thing that's interesting, that Stephen Greer, that they're going to use this threat of extraterrestrials to build this world government, have people come together. And all right, I guess we've covered a lot. How do we, just again going back to your thoughts, how do we survive the Hunger Games? You said earlier, I think it's important to not feed the beast. This is, intuitively, I've just not been a fan of going to the Walmarts and the Costco's. Like here in Mexico, they're building where I live, the third Costco in Guadalajara. And I learned recently Costco is 70% owned by BlackRock and Vanguard. And so I think it's important to just not give our money as much as we can to these systems and use others. I'm not against, like you said, using X. I'll use X just to do what I'm doing. Each of us has our own sort of line in the sand. For me personally, that's not yet crossing that line in the sand. And so just for me, the usual is try to be as independent as we can. I like the idea of having a rural plot of land, if one can, but just further thoughts for you in terms of how to survive the coming Maze Runner.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that it is possible to like completely escape it, right? Like there's so many systems, like even using the internet, if you manage to create your own decentralized encrypted, like you're still running the internet off of state-owned, data lines and power grid and things like that. So I think it's important to really look introspectively and see how much you want to escape and how much you're willing to sacrifice as far as luxury, convenience, ease of use, access to things, and sort of set that goal for yourself as an individual. I really appreciate the things that Derek Bros writes about as far as his like exit and build strategies. I'm actually sort of trying to implement a lot of those myself, but becoming aware, I think, is the first step. Knowing what all avenues end up feeding that beast, and then trying to find, and if you can't find, build those alternatives yourself. I've been trying my best to get away from big food in the last year or so, after learning like everything's owned by Unilever essentially and PepsiCo and all these companies. So I have been networking with like local farmers. I shop exclusively basically at this point at the local farmers market, and I talk to them about how do you feel about Monsanto, how do you feel about Bill Gates, and all. And if they give me a very passionate response back, I feel comfortable that they've also like done the research and things. But if you're ever curious, like, well, what are you feeding your livestock? What sort of things are you using on your plants? I think that the war from the gut is very important, and that's where we get a lot of like health complications that they end up utilizing big pharma to sell solutions. But also the ties with like the science behind the vagus nerve and the gut to mind to heart connection, and the way that affects your mood and your just sort of mortality, your living conditions and things. And I think getting away from that big food industrial complex is extremely important. I think very much like you said, like finding some rural place, get as far away from the city as you possibly can. You are going to have to sacrifice some of those things that I guess could be considered perks or benefits of living around a bunch of people. Homestead if you can, build, learn how to build and do something with your hands, and self-sustain. So whether that's starting your own gardening or creating some sort of craft or hobby that you can use to make yourself as independent as possible. There's some people that still, they'll create something and then barter it with other people. I've spoken to a few people here locally that they live on a commune together with each other, and it's, we don't want money here. We're just one person grows apples and one person makes chairs, and I'll trade you this many apples for this many. I would love to go back to some sort of system like that. And then, obviously protecting yourself as far as using tact and fact is very important, especially if you're going to be discussing these things with people, making sure that you're not getting honeypotted into what could eventually be, hateful rhetoric, and things like that we sort of referenced earlier, as far as the whole, it's all, all the Jews or some other specific group or something like that. So education, awareness, trying to take one foot out of the matrix as much as possible. I think keeping the other one in for awareness and, keeping up to date with all of these things is important. But things like the above phone that I've sort of looked at that try to help you encrypt and keep your data safe. And this isn't a plug for them, by the way. This is just an example that I've read from.
No, please plug away and use my code. I'm an affiliate, so actually, I'm hoping to get Hakeem on he's supposed to come on in March, and March is already passing. So yeah, please do play.
But that's something that I've seen sort of recommended. I've checked out their stuff, and I would really love to deep dive into like how the technology works, because it sounds really, really good. And cell phones and smartphones specifically are the number one thing that they're using against us right now, as far as data collection, profile building, and things like that, to be able to spy on us and know everything about us and sort of cater, different things that we're exposed to try to change our mentality, mindset, opinions. So I really appreciate seeing things like that. Definitely go, if you don't have a relationship with your local farmer right now, I think you should start that today. If you can, go talk to somebody where you're not getting those additives. Look into different water treatment stuff, things like fluoride, chlorine, and stuff being in your water, and just trying to, I guess, I would say network with your local community as much as possible, and try to just decrease your reliance, whether that's a day at a time, slowly but surely. If you just try to be better than the day before and make that progress, eventually you'll get to the point where you can live as free and independently as you possibly could want under the systems that we have, until eventually those do fall away, or have enough people exit them, which is my hope. Because at the end of the day, the system is still a market, right? And with all markets, it requires people's buy-in and participation to be successful. So, eventually, one day at a time, we can escape this system by having enough people exit it and build all these local networks with people that they know, and stop trusting strangers on the internet to sort of save us, or like strangers in Congress and things like that. Like these people don't care about us. They're not here to save us. They're here to get in, make a quick buck, and hopefully, use the goodwill that they build to set themselves up for whatever future system is to come. So just a couple of things I had.
You got my above phone right here.
Nice.
Mine. And just what, some things some of my comments real quick was, the passage from the Bible says you live in the world, but you're not of it. So I don't think we can, and I had a recent guest say the same, that you can, there's no way you can entirely escape. So you just kind of make do. And I always reference Teddy Roosevelt's quote, "Do what you can with what you got where you're at." It's that simple. On the food, I was shocked this week. Lurpak. I've said before that I don't like the Mexican butter, so I buy European butter. And you've got like the French brand, the best is Kerrygold, the Irish butter as well. Yep. And Lurpak, like if they're out of stock. And they just announced recently, Lurpak they are feeding their cows that chemical, the climate change chemical, for lowering their cow farts, their flatulence. So they're feeding that. Yeah, that Bover. They're feeding that to their cows. That's going into coming into the Lurpak butter. So now I'm like, as you say, I'm not buying Lurpak, so I will buy another brand until there are no, if it gets to the point where there's like maybe there will only be one brand of butter that's holding out, and then when we get to that stage, I'll figure out what we do, right? Kind of it's what you're saying, that principle, because nothing is perfect. And I like what you said about tact with fact, honeypotting. My Geopolitics Empire Telegram channel for a while was just flooded with these pro-Nazi militia accounts, and it's kind of like, this is clearly feds, and I'm blocking them. And anyways, I'm not down with your pro-Nazi ideology. And then, or I've had one or two listeners write me and talk about sabotage operations, that some of them worked in cybersecurity fields or something, and I'm like, whoa, do not associate me with that sort of behavior. It's like, My view is pacifist, civil disobedience, non-compliance, all legal, and so it's like, do not get me roped into any of that sort of talk. So, also what you mentioned about Monero, one of my affiliates, escaped to Technocracy, Gabriel Custodian of Watchman Privacy. Again, if people, they get a 15% discount if they use my code. And I get a commission. And it's really good stuff too. I take their courses. He just recently did a podcast with an expert on internationalization. They were talking about Monero, and he was saying the same thing, that eventually they're going to close those doors. So what Derek Rose is doing, again, it's the same principle, like I said, with the butter. Yeah, use Monero and all this stuff, but I think eventually it's not, there's going to be a point where it's going to be nearly impossible to go forward. But then again, when you get to that point, you'll try to figure out alternatives. So you're sort of building an arsenal of how to survive the algorithm ghetto. And just one more news I thought I'd mention. Just Alex Newman, he's been in the podcast. I've been on his show. He just published this morning. I'm from Illinois. We homeschool our kids here in Mexico. And it was just reported that in Illinois, they want to now create like a homeschool database. So you have to register your kid, and it's going to be oversight. And I'm under no illusion that at some point the same thing will be probably introduced in Mexico. And so, this is what we are up against, and it's a battle. And for me, it's kind of like it's a joy. I'm sort of a happy warrior. People use that term, or just for me, it's just to fight against this evil system. It's not like I'm depressed or anything. It's just like, I'm going to give them the best I got, and I'm going to go out with a bang, with a smile on my face. And so we've covered a lot. Number 7, as we'll refer to you, 7 C's. Any other final thought for us?
I think that it's extremely important for people to understand that the number one thing that I always try to preach is like trust in the self, right? So I see like all of these big things like institutional governments, establishment religions, like the Vatican is, obviously very compromised with financial things and stuff like that. Go vet your favorite person and go see like the things that they stand for, the things that they preach, and the things that are funding them. We look at people like Joe Rogan, who's got all of these like ties to companies with like Israel and things like that. And just always do your own research, always think for yourself, never take anything at face value, question everything, especially authority, and always hold everything to the same account. Never make exceptions because you personally identify with something or someone or their narratives, and I think that's about it.
Can't go wrong with that. Your links are in the description, but where are the best places for people to follow you, your projects, and all that?
Yeah. So currently, I'm on X as 7SEES _. I'm on Ickonic as well. Was lucky enough to sort of work with get found by them, and I have a series on there called This Week on the Web. I actually just dropped an episode yesterday with your fellow IMA member, the Last American Vagabond Ryan, and I also do the live stream every Wednesday. Typically it's 4 to 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we build these webs that you guys have seen from me in real time. I never keep people from entering the chat. I always click the everyone button on the live stream and make sure that everyone has a voice there. I think I've gotten extremely lucky with the platform that I do have. And I see so much value in all of these like small citizen journalists that maybe have 100 to 1,000 followers or something, that are posting real hard hitting facts and putting the pieces together much better than people that have 500,000 followers. And I think giving them that avenue and letting them use me as sort of a conduit to get this information out there is very important. So if there's ever a topic somebody wants to cover or sources that I'm missing or something, come to the chat and drop it on me. We'll look at it together. I always vet things in real time as well, and it'd be a good time.
And is it principally on Rumble? Where you do that?
So right now I'm live streaming it on X and Rumble at the same time. and you can go to either. And then I need to get back on top of it because I was supposed to be recording them and putting them on like Odyssey and BitChute. I hate video editing myself. It's like the bane of my existence. Anytime I open the workspace, I just have a meltdown a little bit. More so, I just want to give it up and wash my hands of it and stuff. But I am looking to get those back on there as well.
I am just like you, although it's love and hate where I don't have enough return on investment to warrant editing these conversations further. I just delight edit and throw them up online. Although I did subscribe to Storyblocks stock footage for a while, and it can sometimes be enjoyable to insert high quality video and imagery into these discussions, but maybe at some future point. And while I was at TNT Radio, I did used to subscribe to Ickonic when I was financed by TNT Radio. Unfortunately, I can't afford many subscriptions these days, but I was checking. I was a subscriber back in the day to Ickonic. I think they're very affordable, and I used to use them for ideas for guests as well as ideas to find new guests. And so, all right, everyone, check out 7Cs on X, Rumble, and Ickonic. Thanks, and be seeing you.
Thank you.